Welcome back to my channel where I talk about whatever I feel like talking about. And today's topic is veiling. What's the point and why do women do it? Now, if you look up any video on this topic, the majority will state that veiling is a sign of modesty, dignity, and reverence, as well as submission before the Lord. Now that's 100% true, but ultimately it leads to some more questions. If you want a summary of the video and are too lazy to take notes, I did make a cheat sheet for you. It's linked in my bio and hopefully the description of this video, so make sure you check that out. And without further ado, let's talk about it. One thing about God is he's not just going to teach me a lesson, he's going to drill it into my head. He said, you aren't just going to know it, you need to understand it. So quick backstory, a couple weeks ago, I was beefing with my husband, as one does, because I really needed him to do something for me and it just wasn't getting done. So I'm praying about how to bring this up to him and I'm studying passages about biblical marriage when one of my followers reaches out and says, hey, I would really love to send you a veil. First of all, thank you. And second of all, there's just no such thing as a coincidence. So shout out to BB and Veils because that was awesome. So to understand veiling, you have to understand the biblical hierarchy. Otherwise, this is all just going to sound like a bunch of nonsense. Throughout the Bible, we see multiple passages about biblical marriage and the dynamic between men and women. It's often stated that men are the head of woman and Christ is the head of man. The passage in particular we're going to focus in on is 1 Corinthians 11. Starting at verse 3, it states that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of every woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head, but every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. It's the same as having her head shaved, for if a woman does not cover her head, she might as well cut her hair off. But if it is a disgrace for a woman to have her hair cut off or her head shaved, then she should cover her head. Now we gotta pause for a moment because I gotta be honest with you. I've always skipped over the head covering part. Not that I necessarily thought it was just symbolic, but it's definitely aged out of our Western society, no matter which church you attend. Even in other settings, like weddings and funerals, the choice of a veil has definitely regressed. So what was Paul saying here? It sounds a bit drastic, but ultimately he was saying that if you neglect your spiritual head, you might as well neglect your physical one too. But again, some of my questions still remain. Why specifically is covering your head a sign of submission towards your husband and ultimately towards God? Verses 7 through 9 state that a man ought not to cover his head since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. For man did not come from woman, but woman came from man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. This means that not only through creation are we all made in the image of God, but it naturally showcases the biblical hierarchy of authority. Why is biblical hierarchy important? Because the world you perceive with your physical eyes is not the entirety of God's creation. What am I talking about? Verse 10 is what I'm talking about. It is for this reason a woman ought to have a sign of authority over her head because of the angels. When a woman prays, she is operating in the spiritual realm. And in case you didn't know, if you're a Christian, you have a target on your back. A woman's veil is a sign of protection, that she is under the authority of a God-fearing man, whether that be her husband or still her father, and that man is under the authority of Jesus Christ, who is under the authority of God the Father. The veil is a physical sign to the spiritual world saying, hey, don't mess with me. When you become a believer, you are adopted into Christ's family, making you a child of God. Now, we're all made in the image of God, but we're not all God's children until we accept Christ. This is nepotism at its finest, people, all right? Do you know who my Father is? When you're grounded in your faith, you are operating with the full authority of God. As in, no weapon that is formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that accuses you in judgment you will condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their vindication is from me, declares the Lord. This isn't exclusive to earthly enemies. It applies to all of creation. Our world is full of spiritual beings, and to be quite frank, some of them hate you. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. The top of the biblical hierarchy is God, and every demon knows that. There is no altar, no sacrifice that can even come close to competing with what Jesus did on the cross. Now with God at the top, let's work down from there. Christ submits to God the Father, showing us how to pray and align with God's will. Jesus is called the second Adam for a reason. He came to die for his bride, in the same way that husbands are called to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church. Everyone likes to blame Eve for what happened in the garden, but didn't you ever notice that Adam is actually the one credited for the downfall of mankind? He had authority over Eve, and he had 3 opportunities to take accountability for what happened, and he just never did. Not only did he fail to reprimand her for eating the apple, but he joined in with her. And then when they hear God walking through the garden, they decide to run away and hide. And then when they're confronted about it, Adam turns and blames Eve, who then in turn just blames the serpent. Ultimately, Adam failed as a husband in the garden. He should have said, "No, God, she's under my authority. It was my fault. Don't give her those consequences. Just give them to me." Men are the ones called to stand before God, uncovered, taking accountability for all those under their headship. When your boss assigns you a project at work, and whether you fail or not, he is ultimately responsible for the outcome of said project. Now, you will get your own repercussions, but the severity of the consequences ultimately fall on your boss. When a team has a terrible season, players might get transferred, but the coach is the first one fired. Hebrews 13:17 states that we should obey our leaders and submit to them, for they are the ones keeping watch over our souls, as those who will have to give an account. I really couldn't put it more plainly. If you want a woman to willingly submit to your leadership, you have to love her purposefully, because she's not just someone's daughter, she's a daughter of the king. And man, God loves his daughters. So much so that a husband's relationship with his wife directly impacts his ability to effectively communicate with God. Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are the heirs with you in the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. Men honor God by loving their wives as themselves, and women honor God by submitting to their husband's leadership. This is a dynamic that only works when both are working together. As a man, you should be willing to lay down your life for your wife. And as a woman, you should be worth dying for. Because a strong man requires a strong wife. Proverbs 31 lays out everything you need to know about being a worthy wife. You should definitely read the whole passage. I'm just going to pinpoint a few. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She sets her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her task. She is clothed with strength and dignity, and she can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and a faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. I feel like a lot of the time we think that stay-at-home wives just want to spend their husband's money. He works so she can buy pretty things, and that is such a watered-down version of what God intended for marriage. A woman's work is a jack of all trades, and when her husband isn't around for guidance, she's smart enough to figure it out and complete the task with flying colors. Her husband is there to make her feel feminine enough so she can ask for help. Because no matter how much we as women like to think that we can do it all, a woman is not independent of man, nor is man independent of woman. For as woman came from man, so is also man born of woman. But everything comes from God. Women bring life into this world, and men are there to protect the life from the world. You become one flesh with your spouse when you're married. We see it all across the scriptures. If you study the book of Job, you'll know that with God's permission, Satan was allowed to take everything from him. His livestock, his servants, his children. The only thing he wasn't allowed to do was kill Job. So Job is in the middle of suffering, everything is taken from him, but his wife remains. A lot of the times you hear that Satan left her because he knew she would nag him and tell him to curse God and die. And maybe that's true, but maybe it's because she is one flesh with Job, and by taking her life, you are in turn taking his life. And later on, God restores all that Job had lost, and his wife is still there, and she's able to bring more children into the lineage. So to summarize, for Christian women, the veil serves as a powerful symbol during prayer and spiritual battles. It signifies submission to God's authority and acknowledges a divine order. By covering her head, she of course is showing signs of modesty, dignity, and reverence. But ultimately, the veil is a sign of protection in the spiritual realm, that she is under God's authority. This also isn't exclusive to just married women or even one particular denomination. Veiling is seen as honoring your husband or whoever your headship is. And it's not only out of obedience, but out of trust. Trust that they're going to love you, they're going to protect you, and they're willing to lay down their life for you. So ladies, I just got one question. Are you worth dying for?